Open source in the Asia-Pacific region is something that's really becoming much better understood and more widely adopted. Particularly as economies slow down and budgets get tighter, customers and CIOs are thinking, how can I get better leverage out of the dollar I'm spending? Because the demands on IT are going up, their budgets are getting squeezed. Open source, from a tactical, viewpoint, is one of the weapons they use to attack the budget. But generally, more importantly, they're looking at it from a strategic perspective about having a much more open architecture and more freedom of choice. There's a very interesting, I think, dichotomy in that in different countries, in different verticals, in different sizes of the market, there's a very different reason and rate of adoption. So one example would be in a market like Australia, the conversion from proprietary Unix hardware and software stacks to a more open Intel AMD-based architecture with a Linux operating system and maybe open source middleware could save them dramatic money, and they made that shift. That Unix to Linux migration happened very aggressively in some of these markets. In other markets like Korea, it has not happened, and the Unix vendors still have a very strong foothold in those. We've also seen strong adoption of open source in the mid-tier marketplace, probably not down in the very small SMBs, because some of the skills that are necessary to administer Linux systems might not be as well understood in an SMB shop as, say, a Windows skill would be. But that's changing, and you're starting to get much more certification, more broadly spread among these countries. So there are differences in every country across APAC, and you have to be able to address those in the way you go to market and choose your channel strategy. Open source has really started, I think, more from the ground up and has moved its way, first really with Linux from the operating system, then kind of up into the middleware space, which starts moving you to the things that actually touch the applications. And now some of the applications in open source are becoming popular with things like Alfresco for content management, Sugar CRM for CRM tools. So we view a customer's adoption capability for open source from the application layer to be they can start by replacing the things underneath the application first. They don't have to replace the application first. It's usually what will come later. So they can move their old applications, maybe very proprietary, very closed source. They can move those onto an open source infrastructure, save a tremendous amount of money, get much more flexibility, and have a platform then that they can easily move open source applications onto going forward. There are some of the cases where we don't see open source adoption happening, in many cases sometimes due to a lack of understanding. The customers think about, oh, open source means free, so I can't get support. That's certainly not the case. There are many different avenues for customers to get support for a variety of different open source technologies. So a lot of what we're trying to do is not just the evangelization, but the education of the market about what you can get here in Asia Pacific in terms of support for different parts of the infrastructure. There are some customers, I think, who've gone into open source a little bit either misguided or blindly, where they think about, why should I be paying for software when I can just go get open source? And they put it in, and they find, because open source tends to be very open and extensible, there's a lot of capability. It doesn't lock you in, so there's a natural tendency to want to exploit some of these capabilities, and then you run into technical challenges and you don't have maybe the internal skill set and expertise. So then they start thinking, hey, now I'm spending money again, and maybe they spend as much money actually acquiring the software in an open source environment as they would in a closed source environment, and they think, hey, I'm not saving money, but I think they've missed the point. They then have an open architecture and they have the freedom to choose. In Red Hat, we talk about we're only as good as our last service to the customer. If our very best customer, if we deliver bad value to them next year, there's no reason for them to renew their subscription, and they can go get support elsewhere. They're free to continue using our software in perpetuity. So we don't have a lock-in to them. We have to be able to deliver value or the customer won't renew their subscription with us. So there are many customers who have a lot of their own technical capability and they don't want support, and they use community support. So you can go onto the internet and you can search and find answers. If your business is one where you can afford to try 3 different suggestions and hope that one of them works, it's a perfectly valid way to support your business. If you're running an online transaction business, you probably want to get the right answer right the first time, and that's where a paid subscription comes in. So I'd say open source using free distributions and things without support is a valid thing for people who are experimenting. But when you move in and you're trying to run a business, especially mission critical business, very few CIOs want to take the chance.